This is kind of like the first inaugural. We could make this a weekly thing. We could make this bi-weekly practically. We could almost go daily. Frankly, we could publish daily with the conversations that we've had, just to get anybody who's a third party in on the conversations that we've been having regarding blockchain, regarding startup culture, regarding just business consulting, regarding everything from pitching to marketing to design to high level tech architecting and the big ideas down to some of the execution. I mean, we've been having ongoing conversations like this for forever, but more frequently since probably about 2011, 2012. And so I mean, should we give this like a show name or something, or?
Yeah, that would be funny. That the Crypto Bros podcast
About Cuban crypto. We're like so third culture. We're so not Cuban.
Yeah. I like to say I'm Afro-Cuban just to blow people's mind.
Undercover Latin brothers. Yeah. Oh. It is technically true for anybody who's wondering. That's racist. No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not racist. There's history. There's a story there. But I don't know, man. Do we turn it into some kind of... Well, anyway, down in the comments, hey, if you're just tuning in, for anybody else, and you're thinking, these guys look vaguely familiar or similar somehow. If you know Aaron, you're probably into the tech scene in the greater Albuquerque area in New Mexico, or you're in VFX, or you worked with them on a project not stateside. You worked with them somewhere else doing VFX or working on tech. If I look familiar, it's because you've probably seen me commenting on this kind of stuff, or you worked with me at one of my Fortune 50 clients, or you saw my face on some of their branded training anywhere across the lower 48. Probably not anywhere in Asia, probably not anywhere in South America, mostly, south of Canada and north of Mexico. That's where you've seen me. But we've been talking about this kind of stuff just randomly off and on, and some of it not so random. Some of it's been kind of like actual concept development type stuff where we'll spitball. We'll just talk about like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, and then insert 2 hour conversation about blockchain, or insert 2 hour conversation about pipeline or workflows or just cool, the next $1 billion idea here. And it's, but it always starts with, wouldn't it be cool if, or I had this idea for, boom. My wife likes to say that I've got about a dozen $1 million ideas every day, but obviously, in idea form, they're worth about a dime. So, but we spitball about that kind of stuff. So today we were talking about blockchain and specifically new token launches, ICOs, just the landscape of so many new forks, ICOs, platforms. EOS, of course, this is breaking. EOS is supposedly mainnet's launched and block producers are chosen. So the delegated proof of stake, it's in production. And so there's a platform supposedly, or the notion of a platform that's live, but who's going to launch on it, and why would they? And what are the options, or what are the alternatives, and maybe what are the best use cases? I guess that was kind of the seed for the conversation for today, just figuring out.
Yeah, EOS is really exciting just because of the people involved, and also because of the value proposition of what it's, and also because of the amount of money they raised. I mean, when you've got $4 billion, how can you fail to execute on your idea? Even if all the original founders got hit by a bus, and there's just almost no chance that they will fail, other than the fact that blockchain is just a terrible idea and has no future.
Right.
Which,
right.
Even as bearish as I am sometimes on the cryptocurrencies, I'm pretty bullish on just the whole value proposition behind the decentralization made possible by blockchain technologies in general. So they seem pretty well staged for success at this point.
Yeah, awesome. So, hey, for some of my viewers who might be coming in and they're only aware of blockchain because of its connection to cryptocurrency, what you mentioned right there is going to be maybe a good jumping off point in terms of our first tangent. But blockchain versus distributed ledger, right? Distributed ledgers don't necessarily require blockchain, and blockchain doesn't necessarily require an open ledger.
Yeah, there's a spectrum of like, of what blockchain might be considered by some people. I mean, if you want to talk about it from the perspective of, say, like a Bitcoin maximalist, this sort of like immutable ledger that is strictly enforced with a very specific set of game theory mechanisms to help secure the blockchain. That's like one version of it, right? That's like the blockchain 1.0 sort of prototype MVP. First killer app is that sort of Bitcoin value token or cryptocurrency kind of thing that is secured by proof of work. Then you have all the way through to where you have more loosely enforced blockchainy kind of things where they're immutable, and it's sort of like an upgrade on just like a database almost. On that other end of the spectrum, where the security is not as tight, and it's like a lot of private blockchain concepts are centered more around that, where it's like you don't entirely distrust or trust your partners, but it's just a mechanism to create some more transparency internally on a project where you have multiple stakeholders.
Got it. So kind of reliant more on perimeter security and not so much the inherent security of the blockchain itself.
Yeah, and then it's more like to create more of an immutable log of what occurred as you move forward with your sort of semi-trusted partners. So, there's technologies that sort of facilitate or power any level of this. And that's kind of when we're talking about protocol level innovation that's occurring right now in the blockchain space. This is like kind of still where everybody's working, like all the dApps and with the exception of the cryptocurrencies and some of the foundations of a lot of the sort of use cases. A lot of it is still just people working out the actual underlying technologies to facilitate the future technologies. Not to downsell it too much, because there's some interesting projects that are already happening. And I think people who are ignoring those and saying there's no use case for blockchain are kind of maintaining willful ignorance as to the fact that there actually are some very interesting dApp type or applications being built right now, but they're still early stages, most of them, with the exception of the cryptocurrencies, which are pretty well established at this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of nuts though that as a necessary iteration of blockchain technology, the cryptocurrencies they take front seat for so long. And I mean, it's so long, dude, it's 10 years now, essentially 10 years that cryptocurrency is the use case for blockchain technology. And that iteration of distributed ledger, which again, isn't new, you can do redundant databases, and that's technically distributed ledger, right?
Yeah.
Kudos to Google and Azure and everybody else that's been doing that as a service to their clients, but not quite in the same way as blockchain, right? What it brings inequality.
I wish I had the article. It's relatively recent. It's in the last couple of weeks. So somebody was saying there's absolutely no use cases for blockchain. And when I was reading this, I'm like, maybe you're not aware of maybe it's things like CryptoKitties and stuff are sort of games. And there's other dApps that are sort of more game-like in their application. But I look at the game sort of more like proofs of concept of the fact that there are people desperately trying to build something. Uses it, and if people want to play the game, well, then that's fine. And it doesn't exclude the fact that there's a lot of theoretically possible things that are actually in the works right now that eventually will work. In terms of more like, let's take, for example, the securities token thing, which is just around the corner. Right now, it's early stages because the technology is still coming into focus. But in terms of what you could make a blockchain do, it's not even hypothetical. It's absolutely possible given the technology. It's just a matter of getting, closing the gap between getting from point A to point B on the development of the various moving parts that are necessary, like the KYC parts and the and essentially sort of more like strict KYC.
For anybody who's tuned into this and maybe doesn't know, KYC stands for Know Your Customer, and it's sort of it's a quick way to encapsulate in one acronym a bunch of laws, at least in the United States, there are numerous laws, and internationally laws that have to do with knowing who you're doing business with for the purpose of financial transactions between individuals and corporations and governments. But KYC is all that stuff.
Yeah, and it could also just be knowing who you're dealing with, which might seem antithetical to the sort of value proposition of a lot of blockchains, where it's like, oh, it's anonymous and it's whatever. But
to exist in today's world, I mean, the state is an actor that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, you can't send large amounts of money around without having some comeuppance on that. And at least as a business, there has to be accountability for who you're interacting with, mostly because they're the whole war on terror thing. And you know, as a sort of libertarian type leaning person, all this notion of the government getting involved, anytime war on anything is attached to anything, it gets me nervous. Like the war on drugs or the war on whatever.
Right.
Because then all of a sudden
the war on drugs, pay no attention to what the other hand is doing. Right.
Yeah. Right. But at the same time, those are valid concerns that you might be funding terrorism. You might be funding like nefarious things if you don't really know who you're dealing with and you're moving large amounts of money around. So now that we're moving out of that phase of sort of like the hobbyist era of Bitcoin and more into the serious era of where institutional investors are getting involved, people are making things like security tokens. I mean, now it's time to sort of grow up and move into that realm. And that's why when you read a lot of the articles that talk about how, I guess you'd say regulation is good. A certain amount of regulation is good for this industry. There is always going to be a sort of Wild West component. I think you can't stop people from writing software unless you literally cut off all the internet entirely and outlawed VPN. It's just impossible. I mean, look at China. They have one of the strictest sort of national firewalls in existence. And they can't even stop people from perpetually creating VPNs and sort of sneaking through the wall.
No. The hunger to perpetuate innovation, the hunger to perpetuate the species. Even I'm just going to call it a linked drive. People, for as long as people are alive, they're going to want to do stuff and express themselves via technological creativity. Now, these are the tools that we have now, right? It's no longer about iterating on the wheel. Now it's iterating on standing on the shoulders of so many giants who stood on the shoulders of so many giants before them. Yeah. The next wave of AR and entertainment technology is just mind-boggling. There are people alive today who honestly believed that they would never live to see some of the stuff that's around.
Oh yeah. I just did an AMA a couple of weeks ago on Reddit where people were asking me questions about like what the state of the art of CG technology was. And it's surprising that everybody's still not even on the same page about like literally what's possible today. Like they're still thinking that it's stuff that's like in the future. There's a couple of different places when it comes to CG. People are either like insanely naive they just think anything's possible, right? That you can essentially create reality like that Wag the Dog movie. And
yeah, Superman's face is a pretty good indication that you can't just do anything.
Yeah, right.
At least not without an unlimited budget.
But at the same time, there's other people who are sort of semi-insiders or students that still don't realize that just exactly how much is possible given the current technology without it necessarily being too burdensome. You can essentially do, if you have the skills, you can do a lot of it at home yourself already. So
Gollum's face and King Kong's face are, to use the exact same example, are a perfect example of what is possible, provided you throw enough money at it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you have a talented team. I mean, there's a huge spectrum of skills necessary that are not vested in a single individual in most places. It's a very rare individual who has all of the skills necessary to execute stuff at that level completely independently. But so where was I going with all this? It's the same thing with sort of this future shock effect of not exactly always knowing what the state of the art really is. And really seeing the train coming. And I think that there's still some people who haven't onboarded basically the implications of what the whole crypto/blockchain revolution means in terms of possibilities. Like I was talking to a securities guy recently, and it's just, this was not so long ago. It was like about 3 months ago. The whole securities token thing was not on his radar at all. The blockchain thing had barely permeated his consciousness.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, that's the train coming at you. That's the bus that's coming at you to completely disrupt your business.
Well, here's a scarier thought. That's the train coming at the person that needs an answer from that guy as to what does cryptocurrency and what does blockchain mean. They need a formal government, like they need a state answer from this person via this person's opinion, whether it's informed or not, whether it's, whatever their intentions are, they have to be able to clearly define for other people, like, oh yeah, the state views your activity as such and such. And they just learned about this last quarter.
Yeah. I mean, it is a little far out, and I tend to sometimes get ahead of myself sometimes when it comes to the how soon stuff is going to be here in terms of technology. But at the same time, the blockchain
we were supposed to have flying cars already.
Yeah, right. Well, and depending on how you look at it, we sort of already do. But it depends on how you want to. Really depends on how you want to categorize that.
I mean, I was supposed to be able to buy a flying car at used car prices and operate it myself.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's not happening right now. But if you want a $2 million flying car, you could always go get a Jet Ranger or something right now. So, or if you just don't mind flying a traditional small aircraft, you could get a light sport license and like really quick and fly a 2-seat aircraft that's relatively quick. There's no speed limit. Well, in terms of in the air of a light sport aircraft. I mean,
right. Fair enough. But to use the corollary of all the other technology and the state of the art, in terms of these concepts of something that has ease of use, that is accessible, that where everything has kind of moved within grasp of the common man. Yeah. We're seeing these concepts like VR and AR. They're here. It doesn't matter, like you said, it doesn't matter if somebody is uninformed, somebody doesn't get it. For the price of your upgrade, every single person has a VR/AR device in their pocket. Well, every person in the first world in developed nations. Yeah, when it comes to stuff like definitely IT technology related stuff or computer Moore's law, anything tied into Moore's law, I think most people they can't think exponentially. So the fact that they may not even realize just how powerful their smart device is in their pocket, right? And they probably, I never thought that I'd have, the computer, you were holding up your phone. I'm holding up mine. It's the new Galaxy. Oh, nice.
So the amount of power in this phone, when I got my first Android phone, it was only single core. And I was like, I wonder how fast these CPUs are, because the graphics seem pretty snappy on this thing and stuff. So I wanted to relate it to some of the computers I'd used professionally to do computer graphics for television and stuff like that. It was more powerful than the first computers I was using to do computer graphics. It was more powerful than the phone. My first Android was as powerful as the computers used to do Jurassic Park.
Wow.
And the CPU in terms of its just raw benchmark performance. So I was like, what?
Right? Well, because ARM has gone to with the ARM I think V8 is what they're on right now, is what their current iteration of the architecture. It's a 64-bit 8-core processor in these things, and some manufacturers are pairing it with like 8 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, we're living in an amazing time, and with the ubiquity of networks and stuff, I don't think. Okay, so to tie it back into the whole blockchain crypto thing, I don't know if you could turn it off even if you wanted to, because people would just create mesh networks that would circumvent the fact that you cut off all the other networks. It wouldn't be as fast, but it might be a little bit before your time. So Seth's my younger brother, in case you're wondering. But he's not.
Aaron's got that youthful glow, but thank you for letting him know.
We've got this in the family. We've got the little guys. He's from the little guys, and then the older guys. So the family had 2 distinct sort of like age groups in it, and he comes from the younger cohort. But do you remember BBSs and sort of dial-up? Did that exist at all?
Oh, okay. No, totally. Well, no, that's just it. Like technically and again, for the record, and I've got that youthful glow too. I'm not technically a millennial. I know I might look like one. I'm not actually one. I am technically on the tail end of Gen X. So yes, I came of age with the internet. That happened. As I was in high school, email was a thing. Yeah. Was it abused yet? No, that didn't happen until I was in college.
Yeah. So, these BBSs, they had this thing called FIDO mail, which was essentially a mesh network that would forward mail from BBS to BBS so that you could get mail without there being a persistent network. So even, that would kind of mess up blockchain a little bit, because you kind of need a little bit more of a
consensus. Consensus purposes, you have to make sure that there's a way to ensure that everything works copacetically.
You need to propagate blocks and messages effectively near real time. So you need to have some kind of persistent network, but you could still create persistent mesh networks given current technology, wireless or whatever, that would probably be good enough to create a backbone for this. And I think they'd be very difficult to shut down. So, and even if, I just don't see the always on networks ever going away. So even if there was a really strong attempt to suppress this technology, people would just essentially create dark nets within there. They just create like their own additional, like a new Tor or whatever it took, their own VPN private network overlaid on top of that network and try to hide the traffic in there. So I just don't, I don't see blockchain ever being able to suppress. That's why, jumping back to, again, we'll do this a lot. You'll see that we'll kind of go down rabbit holes and then we'll try to tie it back in.
That's the nature of these conversations. So if these become public, like just get used to it every single time. We're going to try to put show notes in the top comments so you can have a time code to jump to. But even then, I make no promises.
Yeah. So this is tying it back into the whole thing about regulated sort of crypto and blockchain kind of things and sort of trying to tame the beast. And then the sort of Wild West aspect, which will probably always exist. To take, for example, the decentralized exchanges that are coming into existence now. There's a few.
Oh yeah, well, 2018 is going to be the year of decentralized exchanges. This is as a trend.
And if the operators of those decide that they want to remain completely anonymous, and they don't want to play by the rules and do all the KYC and AML and then what do they call it? So here in the United States, there's they call it the Bank Secrecy Act, which is like so many government sort of named things. It's like the No Child Left Behind.
Well, I want to say that AML has its corollary in EU states, and in every major state has their version of AML.
Yeah, so, I'm pretty sure they got, because it's anti-money laundering. This is what that acronym stands for, anti-money laundering. And then Bank Secrecy Act, which also has some provisions for essentially you have to narc on anyone who does transactions over a certain size. So even though the thing is called the Bank Secrecy Act, it's really the bank we're telling all your secrets act.
You gotta love a post-freedom world, right? Have freedom with a side of with a side of bank secrecy.
Freedom with a side of permission-based everything. Yeah, that's the world we live in.
Why can't the government give me a safe space for my money? I mean, like where I can cuddle with someone. And
there's even that video of Obama talking about how crypto is like everyone having their own private Swiss bank account, which is, it's not entirely true with non-privacy coins like Bitcoin, but with the privacy-oriented coins, I don't know how many of them have been cracked yet. Maybe the NSA and all the spy organizations are trying to break through the secrecy of them.
I know with crypto notes, they're forking at an alarming rate. Good luck to them with that. At least with crypto notes, with Zcash, I think they're still doing pretty well, but they've made on their forums, I guess, overtures of partnering with some financial institutions. So yeah, all bets are off now.
At a certain point, I mean, they do have to interact with the traditional economies. You can't buy stuff at most places using crypto. And so you might be able to use these tokens of value in private exchanges where the participants agree that it'd be fine to stay 100% crypto. But yeah, eventually you do have to interact with the traditional systems. And if you go to any of the exchanges that will exchange back to fiat, I'm not aware of any that don't either have very, very low limits without verifying your identity, or that won't allow you to cash out in fiat at all without knowing your identity. So anyway, we're at that point now where even though a lot of the popular press likes to say that it's an unregulated market and this and that, it's really not entirely true. I mean, even now, I don't know if it's the SEC or it's one of the government bodies here, is looking into the whole thing of essentially market manipulation, which kind of falls under their jurisdiction, because even the crypto exchanges, I mean, maybe people thought that they weren't under any kind of jurisdiction for things like manipulation, but that stuff, there's already laws that apply to that. And so now they're finally starting to realize, okay, the amount of volume that's happening on these exchanges is high enough. We have to start actually policing them. So yeah, this comes along, but it's good for the industry. So now we're jumping back to why regulation is good for the industry. People have a higher level of confidence. They can go to an exchange and that some whale isn't going to step all over them and just manipulate the hell out of the market. And they'll just become a bag holder because they're naive and they don't know how to, they don't know the rules of the game of this, essentially that it's rigged and that whales are completely manipulating everything. So,
yeah. So for anybody, a couple more terms to be aware of, and this is, I mean, I published this in a free ebook, so shameless plug, go download it. It's in the comments down below. But whales, so somebody that has a lot of a given coin or a cryptocurrency, we don't often hear that term in traditional investing. Not right. It's not used the same way.
I don't know. I hadn't heard it. You know,
I don't think it is. Yeah, I think it is a strictly crypto term. And then bag holder, just somebody who's left holding the bag. They still have a bag full of coins, regardless of the size. Right? You might be a tiny bag holder, or you might be a whale. But if you're left at the end of a dump while a currency is devaluated, then you are a bag holder.
Yeah. If you're upside down, you're holding a bag. Don't mortgage your house to buy cryptos. Bad idea. I would never, as bullish as I am on the whole thing long term, I would say it is still very experimental. And one of the hardest things about blockchain and crypto based projects is that they're not valued according to traditional metrics. Like when you look at something like equity, just traditional equity in a company, there's very well established rules for valuation of that company based on revenue and the balance sheet and just financial performance of the enterprise. With cryptos, most of these ICO type concepts, there's nothing even remotely like that to value them, and most of them don't produce value that in any way would ever flow back to the essentially token holders, and they're not shareholders, but the people who are sort of invested in those tokens. So it's like, just be measured in your experimentation in the
right.
in that space.
And on the note of mortgaging your house, not mortgaging your house, I'll use the worst possible example, right? So worst case scenario, you wouldn't mortgage your house for Beanie Babies. At least you shouldn't have. So we did. They learned their lesson. But on the flip side, you wouldn't mortgage your house for a commodity you thought was hot. You wouldn't mortgage your house to go all in on gold.
Yeah.
Or all in on anything.
Yeah.
Trading traditionally.
Yeah. Now, having said that, I know a lot of people that are doing quite well on cryptos and essentially trade them full time right now. So, but
that number is growing. Apparently, yeah. I mean, there was an article. I want to say that it was Wall Street Journal. They ran an article about how young traders, generally millennial traders, day traders, they're walking away from their jobs because anybody who invested before the bull run and had enough to work with before the bull run, they're doing so well now that they are replacing comfortable six-figure incomes, just trading crypto daily. Mm-hmm. So like in some cases, they're doing as much in a day on crypto as they were earning in their salary. Mm-hmm. Why in the world did you keep a day job?
Yeah. And there a lot of the people who trade cryptos now that come from traditional backgrounds are trading the volatility anyway. They don't care about blockchain or crypto or any of that stuff at all. They just see really exciting charts that go up and down with a high enough volume for them as a more sophisticated trader to make loads of money. So of course they're all over it.
Yeah, awesome. So we've mentioned crypto. We've mentioned don't sell your house. You've learned some cool terms if you're kind of new to the space. But let's talk about something that's a little more kind of more of an intermediate / advanced topic right now, and evaluating platforms for innovation in blockchain. So moving away from the crypto aspect, and maybe let's talk about that briefly also. There is a difference between cryptocurrency and crypto in general. Rather, a difference between cryptocurrency, blockchain, and distributed ledger technology. They're not the same thing. Now, Bitcoin is.
They all overlap.
Bitcoin is the same. It is the center of that Venn diagram. But crypto and cryptocurrency, you could say crypto referring to cryptography, which is it's a necessary component of a lot of blockchains in terms of achieving consensus in the proof of work. So, but that doesn't, not every cryptocurrency relies on blockchain technology where it's an immutable ledger that is chained together by creating new blocks of information and achieving consensus through cryptography. And not every single blockchain requires cryptography as the proof of work. So there's a difference. Blockchain technology is important as a technology. Cryptocurrency is important as a financial movement. Cryptography is important in an age of privacy concerns And distributed ledger technology is important in the information age. They're not all exactly the same thing. So if somebody says blockchain, they don't necessarily mean cryptocurrency. And if somebody says cryptocurrency, they don't necessarily mean blockchain technology.
Yeah, especially a lot of these traditional guys like Jamie Dimon completely. I mean, originally he came out swinging, right? Like it was like one of those Russian wall, like, duel, and the guys just come out and they I don't know, it's some kind of village thing that they have where they have these like duels, right? But they all come out and they just start punching each other.
Yeah,
he was
Kimbo Slice.
Yeah, he was just swinging like wildly, just trying to hit everything, and then he started to sort of back down a little bit. Now his technique has improved, right? He's thrown a little bit more jabs in there from time to time. He's just trying to like be more tactical in his attacks, it seems like. But all of the mainstream guys are behind the raw blockchain part because it's not disruptive necessarily to their business. As I mentioned earlier, they have they're probably looking at it more from the perspective of sort of private blockchains that would be between banks or stakeholders. There's actually some interesting opportunity there. Just especially, let's say, if those blockchains were auditable externally, like it wasn't just a truly private blockchain where only those stakeholders were involved, if other people could look at it. I mean, one of the gripes, if you listen to people like Max Kaiser, one of the gripes that a lot of the crypto people have about the traditional banking system and the traditional financial markets is that they are completely rigged. I mean, like, just you don't even have to look very far back to see stuff like the LIBOR scandal, where they were literally like violating the trust that was put in them by the industry to do their job without being corrupt. And they were like lying about the LIBOR index and stuff.
Well, and as the story goes, Satoshi Nakamoto, the pseudonym for the person or persons, men or women, or both, that launched Bitcoin. The story goes that, and in the white paper, apparently Bitcoin was launched as a direct response to the subprime lending crisis, the subprime mortgage crisis that functionally, gave made the United States sneeze and made the world catch cold financially. So it was, like there's a reason that traditional models of trust probably should be questioned in terms of finance.
And then the powers that be sort of tend to fall back on, we need to have experienced people who run these banks and stuff calling the shots when it comes to setting prime rates. And
that's true, but who watches the watchmen?
And the what do they call it? Quantitative easing. Like it's the Fed's job to figure out how much more money to print because they know best. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the whole Bitcoin thing was a response to that. And then now it's become like the rally cry or the sort of rallying point for the whole, at least the people on the crypto side of the blockchain space.
Right.
And there's, go ahead.
Oh, just that's kind of where the intersecting interests meet, right? Where for crypto enthusiasts, blockchain is useful. And for blockchain enthusiasts, the sex appeal of crypto is useful because it creates this, there's all this attention, right? Like the cryptocurrency pundits and commentators across YouTube, they get tons of love. And I can tell you from personal experience, talking about mining, not so much. I mean, it's not quite the same. It's not as sexy to be like, all right, well, here are the hardware stats of this mining setup. Other than that, it's like, oh, cool, it generates crypto. Like, you see what I mean? But it's not really blockchain technology per se. It's just tangentially related.
Mining is a good gateway drug to getting into crypto. It's one of the reasons why it's kind of nice that there still are these sort of like smaller Me Too shitcoin launches constantly, because if you really want to just experience it firsthand, you could just pick one of those, just these tiny coin launches, new thing, mine with just your regular old, I mean, actually for a while you could still mine Ethereum efficiently just on a regular workstation. It's kind of, we're beyond that at this stage, but just like last year even, you could still mine Ethereum using your one GPU in your one workstation or desktop machine and just sort of experience, even though you only got a tiny little bit of Ethereum out of it, or Ether, it was a way for you to participate and see how that part worked. It really is the gateway drug. I mean, it actually took me a while to fully connect all the dots about how the whole a game theory system of the mining worked. Even at like, let's see, I was already active as a miner before I fully was able to onboard how the blocks get processed and everything like that. And fortunately now every year there's more and more descriptions of how the actual underlying thing works that are sort of dumbed down, but not dumbed down to the extent that you're losing the actual technical essence of how it works.
Right. Well, and more tools like block explorers and more tools for transparency in terms of the entire process of blockchain production.
Yeah. Because that's one of the problems with a lot of the mainstream press coverage of the way mining works. For example, it's like too simplified to really, it's like, oh, people answer, they solve a complex puzzle. Yeah, but what? Why? It just seems so abstract the way they describe it. They never describe how it is essential to the actual processing of a Satoshi-like blockchain, anything that has a proof of work type algorithm attached to it. And so you have to dig a little deeper if you really want to understand how it all works.
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up also with that. So we've on the channel on the Seth Estrada YouTube channel there, we've got blockchain production week or block production week going on where we're talking to developers. We're talking to coin launches. I want to say I should be talking to a popular privacy coin project next week. I can't name names, but it rhymes with Zencash. And so we're talking about proof of work and talking about where it's going, because some of it is has been, at least from the GPU mining perspective, people who were hobbyists, like you were saying last year, had just 1 or 2 GPUs and a workstation, could mine almost recreationally with whatever they had lying around and could actually earn something of value, which today would be worth plenty. The same was true of a lot of these other newer blockchains like Zcash, Zencash, Bitcoin Gold, and some of the other forks that use an algorithm called Equihash. And an ASIC machine was announced by Bitmain, Chinese manufacturer, that now mines Equihash. And so all of these projects have been put on notice, like, oh, well, all these GPU miners that were helping us out from our inception, like from just after our Genesis block, thanks so much, so long, and thanks for all the blocks.
Well,
but
I think
they're threatened.
I think that's part of the reason why Ethereum was always slated to move beyond, to phase out proof of work, especially once proof of stake. There's always mathematical for anybody who does analysis. They can always create a mathematical proof that shows how proof of stake will ultimately fail. And it isn't as secure as proof of work. It's harder. It's easier to attack, I guess I should say, but it requires typically long time frames to do so. Whereas, depending, as you've seen lately, a lot of the news has been around these 51% attacks that have been happening to the weaker coins, and that's one of the problem of having shared proof of work algorithms. Basically, is that you have. So how's the best way to visualize this? You have a lot of mining power capacity.
Hold on just a second. So you should have, this is awesome. We could get addicted to this together. But if you hover over the video area here, you should have access to where it says share screen. Oh, come on. When you pop up in the share screen menu, you should have an option to whiteboard.
Oh, okay. Share screen. So if I share screen, it'll give me a whiteboard option.
Yep. So press on the up arrow.
Oh, cool. Whiteboard tool. Mm-hmm. I see why you like this thing.
So feel free.
So now I'm whiteboarding. So I'm just going to draw it like let's not consider it a Venn diagram, but like mining power. And then you have let's just assume that this is general purpose compute, right? It could be applied to any algorithm. And this is actually the danger of GPU mining, to be honest. In spite of people always pushing back on ASICs, this is something to consider. So this is general purpose compute mining capability. And you have a bunch of coins or a bunch of blockchains that depend on this. They have to split shares of this overall mining capacity of the people who just are willing to mine, right? And so these miners are always naturally going to go for the most profitable coin. Okay, so that's cool. So these are the miners. Now, all of a sudden, let's say that a certain percentage of these are on one of those. Is NiceHash the one that lets you actually buy other people's mining?
Oh,
thing?
yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a story for that in a minute, but go on.
So let's say that there's some percentage of these guys that are actually, they're not traditional miners. They're even more mercenary than the traditional miner. They're willing to just sell their mining capacity to the highest bidder, right? So let's say that, and I'm trying to make this visual, that this is, coin, I'm not even going to give it a name. We'll just give it coin A. I'm not going to relate it to some real coin. But you can see that the overall percentage of mining capacity that they're getting of the network organically based on how profitable they are isn't very big.
Right.
But there's all these really super mercenary guys that will sell their mining capacity to the highest bidder. So some attacker out here, let's just call him Bob. So Bob isn't normally the attacker, but I can't
Everybody say hi, Bob.
Bob. Can't remember the canonical name for the one that's typically the malicious one, like Sybil has a name. But so Bob decides he's willing to spend some just cash money to buy this whole share, slam this coin with it, and boom, you've got your 51% attack. And it just cost Bob a little bit of money.
Right. So there was a website that was just launched. To show what the approximate cost, and it's ongoing. They're pulling in live data to show what the approximate cost would be if you wanted to use NiceHash as your jackbooted 51% attack thug.
Yeah.
And apparently, I mean, it was shocking. At least on the Equihash algorithm, there are several coins, privacy coins, that have a large enough market cap that they're desirable targets. Mm-hmm. So there's significant trade volume going through. Bitcoin Gold, their attackers got away with an estimated $18 million.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is actually, so for Bitcoin maximalists, this is a really good argument for why a bunch of shit coins that use general purpose compute are not a desirable thing. Aside from them just being sort of parasitic on the Bitcoin value proposition, there's security implications especially when they're using general purpose compute to produce their hash rates, and they use proof of work. To be honest, given the current state of the 51% attack, the new reality that's come to light, it actually makes simpler proof of stake coins look more secure. Like, for example, Blackcoin, one of the original proof of stake, not the original proof of stake coin, but the original pure proof of stake coin. It's had 3 different proof of stake algorithms. So they sort of evolved and tweaked it a little bit over time to improve the game theory behind their proof of stake. But now it's actually a very simplistic algorithm. Proof of stake 3.0 is actually sort of simpler than the earlier versions of proof of stake with stake weight and stuff like that. You can't just go out and hire a bunch of NiceHash and attack Blackcoin. You have to go buy a whole ton of black coins to do it, meaning you'd have to buy 51% of the total market cap value of Blackcoin to attack it in the same way.
Right, but by that token, while you're on that topic, the thing with crypto that makes it inherently risky right now is that it's so young. It's so young that there are people who have a net worth that exceeds the market cap of numerous coins combined.
Yeah. Yeah, and so proof of stake is vulnerable in that respect. And then there's also the argument that on a long enough time scale, even with starting from a less strong position with a proof of stake coin, you could essentially stake your way up to a 51% attack. It's particularly more risky on coins that have what they call stake weight, where the longer you hold the coin, the more strength it has on the network. So meaning you could, if you had not 51%, but let's say you had 20% of the network coins. That's a lot, but some percent. You could charge them up over time and build stronger stake weight, put them on the network, and then essentially do a 51% attack. But that's why they got rid of stake weight in Blackcoin. And I'm sure, Quantum, basically their proof of stake algorithm is inspired by the Blackcoin. I don't know if they've even tweaked it at all. I think they're still just essentially using proof of stake 3.0 unaltered. Yeah,
that's awesome. So it's funny. I'm editing today. I'm publishing tonight an interview that I did with the lead development or the development lead of a project called Bitcoin Interest, and they are a hybrid proof of work, proof of stake coin, where they use weighted stake, and they asserted that they had done some work on it themselves. I don't know what innovations they brought to proof of stake, because we didn't jump all that much farther down that rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, I hadn't considered that. It makes perfect sense that anytime there's consensus, the moment you own 51% of the coin supply, then
or the weight. That, I mean, even if weight gave you more strength with a smaller stake, that could still bring you up to 51% of network weight, right?
Yeah. So there are coins that are still attempting it, right? And it's a valuable problem to solve.
Stop sharing.
Yeah,
so yeah, this is the 51% attack. And let me wrap up this idea though first. So a Bitcoin maximalist, this is part of the reason why when altcoins first came out, like Litecoin doesn't use a different proof of work to make it ASIC resistant, because it predated ASICs on Bitcoin. It uses a different proof of work to avoid this problem to some extent. It even though people were using general purpose computers to do mining, they were using GPUs, and actually by that point they'd started to move into FPGAs and ASICs a little bit.
Oh, and those are back, by the way. That's hot news from yesterday's video. FPGAs are back in a big way right now.
Yeah, well, and they're kind of exciting. Even though I know people were, I was looking at some forum posts on FPGAs. They were kind of poo-pooing them because they're like, oh, they're too expensive, blah blah blah. But it's like, well, they've grown a lot since those early FPGAs on Bitcoin, because the transistor counts are like way higher on the current generation of FPGAs.
How can they not be, man? I mean, transistor counts on everything is way higher.
Right. And so that's kind of cool. And then the programmability of them is obviously very exciting. And a lot of these the new approach to many of the ASIC resistant coins is essentially to make them more memory hard, which, depending on the FPGA that you system that you have, if you can take enough external memory and you can address it, that memory hardness can still be built into basically a hardware accelerated platform, where it's really the memory you're sticking in the thing that's more of the commodity that the designer of the algorithm has sort of tried to make their algorithm need. Rather compared to the compute component. The FPGA can still be programmed to do enough of the hashing fast enough that it's more of an issue of pairing it with some fast memory. And I'm not too super familiar with the Bitmain's current is it Equihash, the sort of newer ASIC for it's these are the newer memory hard algorithms, and people design them specifically because they're like, oh, it'll be really hard to create an ASIC for it. Well, no, it's just a matter of like different parts that you need to put on a dedicated piece of hardware to mine an algorithm. So
right.
It's impossible.
Even if it meant they had to use hybrid ASIC chips in the same machine,
right?
Use several different ASIC chips on the same machine. So the array, maybe it features 4 different application-specific integrated circuits, but they work in concert with an FPGA controller and a lot of fast memory.
Yeah, essentially, your ASIC is most of your die is covered with RAM, basically, or you have to have external RAM. Or you have to build a dedicated miner that essentially is just using little CPU cores, like cheap CPU cores, and enough RAM. It's just a balanced it's a dedicated mining piece of equipment. It's not even necessarily an ASIC, right? So,
yeah. Well, these new FPGAs are pretty exciting, man. Maybe I'll pull one up while we chat. But these newer boards, they're the newer FPGAs. They have they accept DDR4 memory, and there we go. Just pop the thing open right there. All right, so come on, no, wrong one.
Well, while you're working on that, I mean, so Vitalik Buterin is a really smart guy, and a lot of the choices they made.
I don't know. I think it's just the glasses that make him look smart,
or the funny T-shirts. No, a lot of the choices they've made around Ethereum are because he's sort of the benevolent dictator over there. Even though they do have a lot of developers who contribute ideas and stuff, a lot of the initial ideas that went into Ethereum were essentially just to solve very practical problems, like the whole concept of using gas if you're going to have a Turing-complete scripting language. it's not maybe the most ideal solution, but it's a very pragmatic solution to solving that problem of, for those of you wondering why that's relevant, if you have a language that isn't deterministic in its results. So like Bitcoin has a very simple scripting language, which is guaranteed to exit because it doesn't have it has simple conditionals, but no loops. When you have a Turing complete language, with loops and everything like that, you have what's called the halting problem, which means you could create a program that just never exits.
Right. Because of loops.
Yeah. So if you think about you could essentially,
if you're a non-programmer, imagine Dr. Strange talking to Dormammu and Dormammu never changing his mind.
Right. Yeah.
And now instead, that's a line of code. Dr. Strange as a line of code, saying like, all right, I'm looking for the right conditions. I want you to do this one thing, and it just never achieves the result.
There's no free will though in the program, so Dormammu can never change his mind. If you get into an infinite loop like that. So you could create a poisonous smart contract on Ethereum, and you could even do it now, that just would never exit. And if there was no mechanism for cutting it off, it would just lock up the entire network. You could just, with one little program that got executed once, you could freeze up the entire network. So they had to create some kind of approach to stop that from happening, and their solution was gas. You basically get charged for every execution, every piece of execution that occurs in your program in Ethereum. And so hence, if you don't pay enough to the network to fund the execution of the length of your whole program, it will just exit and it will never complete its mission. And then the transaction that it's associated with will roll back. It will never complete, and you'll lose your gas money. So it's a way of disincentivizing, stopping runaway processes from bringing down the network, and also disincentivizing spammy, like really ridiculous or inefficient code. So that, it's a very pragmatic solution. But the whole choice of even the memory hard mining algorithm that they came up with is a similar kind of thing. It was meant to be ASIC resistant enough, but not ASIC resistant forever, because I don't think that's possible.
Yeah.
Because the goal was ultimately to shift over to proof of stake anyway in their system. So that they, I think close to having mission accomplished.
Right. Let's look at an FPGA really fast. This thing is the new hotness right now. So, and let me move that out of the way. This guy right here. So this is the new hotness. What you don't see underneath that shroud right there. Oh no, I'm sorry. You do those 4 slots right there. Those are actually DDR4 full-length DIMMs. And this accepts up to 64 gigs of DDR4 at ultra high speeds. Cool. So this is the new hotness right now. The the VCU 1520 or 25, and there's a group led by I'm gonna slaughter it because this is recent, right? A lot of this stuff is breaking, but there's a group of FPGA programmers that are essentially creating a memory hard wrapper, and so custom bit streams to mine these memory hard algorithms are being contributed by other FPGA programmers. And the pioneers with this particular board and this particular space are saying, like, all right, we're going to create an environment in which you can plug in your custom bit stream for these memory hard algorithms. And now this FPGA is becoming the new commodity hardware for mining, and increasing the hash rate for miners that want to hit the network hard, but with only one piece of equipment, and then power consumption, of course, being more efficient, right, or lower overall.
And that, if you think about it, for anyone who thinks that there are people that there aren't people probably out there using this already, if assuming that the performance is good enough and you had the skills to program this thing, of course you would go a little bit out on a limb or find a couple buddies to help fund you with some friends and family money to go do a pilot test and build a mini farm of these things, and then just mine the heck out of it while you still had an advantage, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's already happened. Presently, what's happening is there's kind of a gentleman's agreement between these FPGA programmers, at least on this particular model, where they have spoken to Exalinks, the manufacturer, and they are limiting purchase orders to 12 per purchase order or 12 per customer. Now, granted, it's in the same way that Bitmain says, like, oh, you can only buy 2 of these ASICs, and you walk into certain farms and they've got like 2,000 of them. It's like, right, get 2, got it.
Yeah, the insiders already got their deal, and now they're just distributing them a little more widely to avoid the appearance of centralization.
Right, right. But I do think that the team that's behind this recent movement of creating sort of the Bitstream wrapper, we'll call it, or the Bitstream environment, where for the person who's used to like one-click mining with applications like Claymore Miner, they're used to one-click mining on Windows or one-click mining on Linux, they can get into this space. They don't have to be a programmer to program their own custom bit streams to get into FPGA mining. And I think the guys and gals who are behind this effort here, I really do think that they intend to try to work with the manufacturers to limit the proliferation and the proliferation of this FPGA arms race, right? Mm-hmm. Which before there wasn't any kind of limit imposed with ASICs. Even when Bitmain, publicly says there are limits, we know there aren't really limits.
So this is actually a place where I do want to sort of chime in on a concept where about just the ASICs versus the memory hard stuff versus the sort of classic naive algorithms like what Bitcoin uses. So Bitcoin just uses not naive, but a very simple SHA-256 hash, right? It creates a Merkle tree of all of the previous blocks. I don't know the exact recipe of how many blocks are included, or if it's just the previous block or the last two blocks or whatever, or if it's just the transactions in the block. But anyway, at the end of the day, you have one little hash or one little hash that is the Merkle tree, and then you have the nonce, which is the new piece of information that you're trying to include in
right.
As you do your proof
careful how loudly you say that. If you're in the UK, it is a slur.
Okay, well,
you have to actually go out of your way to say cryptographic nonce.
Yeah.
If you're in the UK.
Okay. I'm sorry for them that they aren't on board with.
I think it's more
science.
just that they're more educated. So
yeah.
So it's already been turned into some kind of a slur. It questions whether or not a man is limp-wristed or interested in children. Per se.
Well, so the they just use a very not simple algorithm. It's a complex algorithm that is still cryptographically secure. It's a trapdoor hash function. What all of these other things have tried to do, like Script or Script in particular, Bcrypt, some of these others, they've tried to make it more memory hard. And then those sort of classic memory hardening or hash hardening algorithms, I guess people in the crypto coin or the proof of work sphere, not thinking that those are sufficiently memory hard, have come up with even more memory hard algorithms. In this arms race, typically the reasoning for it is to create ASIC hard or ASIC resistant algorithms.
Well, and now most recently there are multi-algorithm cycles like X16R and X16S, which essentially, and I want to say, wasn't X11 kind of the same thing?
Yeah, X11, X11, X13, all these.
Yeah. So essentially, I mean, that's actually the multiplier, and then the number, I think, represents the number of algorithms included.
Hash salad. Yeah, attempts at complexifying the hash algorithm, which don't necessarily make it more secure per se, but that's typically the reasoning given behind doing that.
Right. Well, and some of them have introduced randomization. So X16R stands for random, X16F stands for shuffle, and it uses the problem is that it uses some kind of like programmatic randomization or programmatic shuffling. And so with an FPGA controller and then multiple ASIC chips that are specialized to that handful of algorithms, the FPGA controller, all it needs to do is figure out how fast to queue up the needed work for each ASIC.
And you could still hard code that into an ASIC as well. You could put enough logic in there to be able to handle the conditionals of a shuffling algorithm. Now you could always make the shuffling algorithm something that was centrally emitted so that they could break it or randomize it in a way that would change the proof of work, but that's a hard fork. Anyway, where I was going with the whole thing of why some of these things are really pointless is because they don't really, for the purposes of proof of work, they don't really make the proof of work any more secure. And as we're seeing especially with the current 51% attack using commodity hardware, you are in fact more vulnerable when you're not. I'm not making an argument for ASICs here. I'm just saying, just from the game theory or the sort of a barrier to entry of attack, You're
Yeah.
more vulnerable when you're using something that can be run on general purpose hardware or an FPGA. You're actually less vulnerable if you're running something on ASICs simply because the production capacity of ASICs is finite. As it is, to get the ASICs made that are available commercially now, you have to be scheduled in a foundry that can schedule you in and build your chips, and you have to build that hardware.
So while I agree, I mean, there are finite limits to the amount of silicon that can be produced, whether it's specialized or it's general purpose. That of course makes perfect sense. Where I disagree is that you can also sell your hash when you're using specialized silicon.
That's true.
And so the 51% attack doesn't go away. That genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah, but I haven't finished the thought, which is the Bitcoin maximalist sort of argument. If there's only one coin that uses one algorithm, there's no chance of a 51% attack, except for 51% of the power necessary to attack being available.
But now you're talking about crypto coinicide. What's the morality of crypto coinicide? Well,
and right now there are already SHA-256 coins that are competitive, right? You have Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. One of them, the weaker, is always going to be the one vulnerable to a 51% attack.
I want to say that Bitcoin Cash uses a different proof of work algorithm, though.
Oh, did they shift? I think they stayed on SHA-256.
Did they?
Yeah.
I thought that they had. It shows I don't mind either Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
But let me pull that up while we chat. So to your point.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the notion that being ASIC resistant is a positive thing is easy to attack. I guess is what I'm saying. Or even a desirable thing, other than the fact that the barrier to entry, like especially when a coin launches, I mean, it'd be very difficult to launch a coin that launched as an ASIC coin, right? So yeah. So when you launch
to your point, it totally is SHA-256. I don't know why in the back of my mind I was like, I think it changed.
Bitcoin Gold, yeah.
So many other Bitcoin forks too. Bitcoin Private went the same way as Bitcoin Gold. They went with Equihash as well. These guys, Bitcoin Interest, they're using Equihash, but then hybrid proof of stake. So at least, but even then,
there's still a few older altcoins that still use SHA-256. So they're highly vulnerable to that kind of attack where you just buy somebody else's SHA-256.
Oh yeah,
and apply it to them.
Well, in terms of an arm race, yeah, the amount of hash power that's available and is being currently pointed at Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, man, it would be trivial. There's got to be, I mean, I'm sure that there are owners of single like mid-scale mines that have enough hash power to attack some of the smaller coins on SHA-256.
People used to do it just for fun back in the day. So that era is going to start again. I mean, look, even like, for example, you could consider the Bitcoin Cash launch as sort of almost, there was almost like I wouldn't quite call it a DDoS attack, but when it was just the side effect of forking from a high difficulty and not getting as many miners, not getting even half the miners at the initial launch. They had to do the emergency difficulty adjustment because their blockchain just stopped. Difficulty was way too high compared to the amount of people who were mining it.
Yeah.
So it just stopped.
Jeez.
Yeah. And then most smaller altcoins, especially GPU mineable ones, have very aggressive difficulty adjustment algorithms that typically adjust on a very short time window, like maybe even block to block, depending on which one they're using. Yeah. So they can adapt to they're less vulnerable to being insta-mined, but that doesn't mean that they aren't vulnerable to having a 51% attack. That can still happen.
Yeah, got it. So if we haven't already lost you, then you probably kind of are down with what we're talking about.
Either that, it's just I need more background. But
you're right. It's like, but if you did jump into the deep end head first and only discover that it's actually the pool is empty, well, let me let you in on a little secret. Actually, no secret. What you see is what you get. There's the nice thing about most of the Estrada families, you don't have to worry about what we're thinking. You really don't. Most of the time, it's right there, face value. But we're talking a lot about proof of work and versus proof of stake. And now with all this hardware, FPGAs, they're coming back in a big way within GPU circles. Something else that I heard, and this is already published in my last interview, so I don't feel bad. I'm not stealing anybody's thunder. But Chrissy mentioned that there is another FPGA that is now it now uses the PCI Express bus and fits into an M.2 slot. and it's something of a GPU accelerator. So it's doing a lot like what we were talking about before, the way that you could overcome some of these multi-algo cycles with a specialized ASIC that has an FPGA controller. It's kind of performing that role, but in these commodity systems that already have GPUs, and they're accelerating some of these memory hard algorithms for the GPUs, and offloading some of the work. And I don't know exactly which part of the process. Again, here's where I have to admit ignorance. I'm not a programmer, and I think I think most of my brothers have been like, they've suffered through me saying like, man, I really should learn programming. Anybody have some good Python books I can borrow? I think I've borrowed everyone's Python book and like gotten 5 pages in. I'm like, I want to go edit a video. But
I learned Python when I was working the hardest I've ever worked in my life. I was working like 12-hour days, and I needed something to just unwind every day. So, and on the weekend, so I actually just retreated into programming.
That's awesome. See, I started, I think the last time I seriously tried to work on learning Python was when I was training for Google and was working long days, and then said, you know what? I really feel like tinkering, and hardware is easy for me to tinker with. So I installed Linux on my Chromebook, which was fun. And then, and was like, okay, cool. I'm going to tinker at the end of the day, try to learn some scripting here. I make no excuses. That's for sure. I make no excuses. I just got bored because I don't think I was working on something that anchored my interest.
Well, there's a lot of people who work in the whole crypto space that don't necessarily aren't programmers, right? I mean, they either write documentation or they do UX UI, they do communication part, they do art. I mean, there's tons of people who contribute. So, I mean, and also you can be a miner without being a computer scientist. You just have to kind of be just good with computers. That's about the limit.
Yeah. I'm finding there are a lot of network administrators that get into mining because the biggest people and data center employees, right? Because they've overcome the 2 major hurdles already for other networks of running enough power and then running a clean enough network that you don't have latency.
Oh, I mean, some of the people, so I've always got like tons of balls in the air when it comes to projects. And one of the projects I'm working on is mining hosting. It's actually one of the things I've been talking to Seth about, and been scouting out different locations here. And I have different partners here that one of them, I mean, if their hair's on fire and they really need hosting, I could probably set you up.
Hey, on that note, actually, so Christy and I spoke off the record. We spoke about you, and we spoke about the locations that you talked about.
Yeah.
If anybody's already like watching this, because this is going to be pretty much unfiltered, mostly uncut. If anybody's watching this right now, you saw the interview with Christy about the minority, and you're thinking, I want to co-locate stateside. Maybe you're in the Southwest and you want to co-locate stateside. Tell Christy, hey, I saw Seth's interview with Aaron, and I'm in the Southwest, and I want to keep I want to co-locate close enough that I can maybe pop in with advance notice and and security clearance or whatever.
The security is like super awesome at both locations that Seth and I've been talking about. So, so now it's just more about just, I guess let's call this a soft announcement. This just to gauge if there's any interest at all. The partners I have, you brought up IT type people. That's what made me think about it, is that they have huge amounts of expertise building infrastructure. They build traditional data centers. So it's like a big downgrade for them to build these sort of tier 1 for anybody who's ever seen a crypto mine. It's pretty crude compared
it's like dirty power, typically non-redundant network.
Yeah. The lowest level of build that would pass muster with the fire marshal. So, so they're adjusting to that reality of building those kind of builds. And so I have
you want raised floors? It's optional.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of cool resource, and I have a lead on a location that's got a pretty good amount of power, and they're very easy to work with. And so yeah, we're waiting on when to pull the trigger on the actual build of that. It's kind of like, is there demand? Okay, well then maybe we'll do that. But that's just the sideline for me. It's like one of the balls I have in the air. I've got a couple other projects in the air, and one of the ones Seth and I talked about earlier that I did want to bring up is this, and I've been authorized, by the way, Seth, since we spoke to talk about it.
All right, nice.
So we're building a platform for making it super easy to get a self-directed IRA that you can do cryptos in. So the platform that we're building is essentially a concierge service that at the end of the day, what you have is a self-directed IRA, a bank account, and accounts on at least one cryptocurrency exchange, so that you're ready to just get to town trading.
Nice.
And it's all in this IRA bubble. It's all properly registered within that bubble.
Awesome.
And
so
that's where all
you're not trying to cobble all this together.
Running all over town. Yeah. Cause there's a lot of legwork. As we're doing the first prototype one, even, it's kind of like, wow, this is a pain. Like, this is ripe for automation, all of these different steps.
Awesome. Well, I'm super looking forward to being able to talk more in depth about that and have you show some of those steps, even like you were saying, how it's not like ultra complex. It can be broken down, but it sounds like it's too early to talk about things like which exchanges would be supported.
Right. Yeah. We'll have to kind of get partnered with somebody, right? And they would be part of that machine.
So hey, if you're watching and you are part of an exchange, you have influence at a popular exchange, then reach out.
Coinbase, give me a call.
I mean, at this point, it's hard to tell. Like there are other actors, other characters coming in. I mean, I don't want to say anything untoward. Certainly with Circle, Goldman Sachs owns a significant amount. So
and so, look at it this way too. This isn't even like a pitch or anything like that. Like if I had a pitch deck and I was doing a full on pitch, I would talk about what's your exit strategy? Well, acquisition, right? Like JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs can buy us because we're the ones that make it super easy to build the vehicle to, whatever.
Awesome. Well, I mean, what is it? What are the guys that, it's Y Combinator? Do they recommend the incorporation? I think incorporated to them last year. Clerky?
And Stripe has a thing called Atlas that lets you build. This is very, very much inspired by Stripe Atlas. They let you essentially organize a corporation, and they do this concierge thing, and they set up the bank account for you. So they do the corporation, the basic filings that you need to organize and get a bank set up.
Got it. So think of it as like Clerky or Atlas, but for people who want to
self-directed IRA.
Yeah, regardless of the application. Then
yeah.
Oh, but it sounds like that last mile is going to be connected.
Well,
to the exchange.
That's the value added is the crypto exchange part. Yeah.
Nice.
That's what makes it differentiates it from the others out there, because there aren't too many that specialize in the crypto space yet. So
awesome. Well, really looking forward to the next announcements there, and obviously, this is a platform for you to talk about it. But let's talk about then. We've run the gamut. Let me see kind of where we're at by way of. Why is there not a timer? Seriously? Oh, that's crazy. Okay, so I don't actually have a meeting timer, which is
how
weird.
Long we've actually been recording.
Yeah, it doesn't show me from within the dashboard here. Okay, fine. But we've run the gamut. We talked about mining. We talked about FPGAs. We talked about which is kind of like breaking news. We've talked a little bit about trading and talked about 51% attacks, which have made a lot of news lately because of the actual real world 51% attacks on mature coins or mature coins with a mature market cap that mature enough they became really attractive targets. Now you've got some of the leadership teams from some of these projects, some of them just saying like, yeah, we welcome ASICs. We welcome it. We think this is a good thing. Some of them saying like, no, the whole point of our launch, and in some cases our algo launch, where they paired a new blockchain project with a new proof of work algorithm. The whole point was to make it, so quote ASIC resistance, or give it ASIC resistance. So you've got some of these coin projects that are like, they run the gamut. Some of them say they want ASICs. Some of them say they don't. Clearly, none of them is perfect. Any of them can be 51% attacked. Bitcoin seems like it's the only one that is anywhere close to being fairly resistant to 51% attacks. But even then, supposedly 80% of all of the mining power, all the hash power, comes from China. So not from one single mine, but I mean, if that figure is to be believed, greater than 80% of the mining power is behind the Great Wall, the Great Firewall.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's something to be concerned about too, mostly because of enforcement. Is stealing from a blockchain, is 51% criminal, a 51% attack? Is it a criminal act?
Not in the books, not yet.
Yeah, I mean, you've stolen something of value, which in most jurisdictions, I think you could make a case for, but that was a criminal act. But you just played by the rules better than everyone else.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be able to frame that blockchain as some kind of intellectual property, and then make the case for the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is decidedly anti-blockchain and decidedly anti-crypto.
Yeah, and
talking about it like intellectual property.
And there might need to be an actual owner. I mean, there might basically, if there was a foundation behind the blockchain, they could maybe say that they represented the interests of the blockchain itself. But I think the hallmark of most decentralized projects, or they should at least strive for this, is that there isn't a centralized controlling body. It's like even when it comes to stuff like Ethereum, it is maybe a software project. There's a company that sponsors the bulk of the development, but that does not mean that they own that blockchain. The blockchain is owned by all the participants.
Right. So let's talk about Ethereum versus EOS right now. Mm-hmm. And in terms of that goes, says Block One is a foundation that raised $4 billion, right, for EOS. And then you've got EOS actually launching, but there is a form of centralization with delegated proof of stake.
Yeah.
So like, to what extent, I don't know, if somebody's looking at launching a project today, and I think this was the original seed for our conversation for today, maybe we can use it to wrap things up. But if somebody were looking at launching a new token today, and they're evaluating Ethereum versus EOS, mm-hmm. like, where do you go with everything we've just kind of like talked about, with proof of work, with proof of stake, with 51% attacks being very real again. And then with the added functionality of the Ethereum virtual machine, and then with EOS being able to script, I think, more flexibly. I'm not familiar enough with the technological features, but it's apparently there's more than Solidity to work with.
It's got a smart contract language that is more performant for sure. Well, Solidity uses bytecode, so it's pretty performant, but they're using WebAssembly. And interestingly, the language they seem to have chosen as their first supported language is C++, which is a pretty low level language and extremely expressive. It's I don't know if there's a subset of it based on their stuff. They have a very different model to the way smart contracts work than compared to Solidity, let's say. But it looks like it's going to be a very flexible and performant system for the smart contracts. A lot of their stuff too has to do with building larger scale dApps. So they've considered the performance dimension of how the I guess you'd say the dApp logic, or the sort of blockchain dependent logic of the system would work, so that it will have less issues of scale with scaling than, say, Ethereum has at the moment, which is I wouldn't say naive, but because it's very different from Bitcoin in terms of architectural details, but still, like, yeah, it's not quite as slick as EOS's sort of system promises to be. It really does look much more like an operating system for building dApps, and that's in theory that's what Ethereum is, but it's more tied to the transactions and the blocks, and it's like there's obviously like a less scalability just in the sort of current incarnation of how Ethereum works. Now, if I had to choose a blockchain today, I might still go with Ethereum. Why? Because it's got market depth. Ether has market depth. It has traction. And there's project for scaling that exists today, like Loom. If I was building a project and I didn't maybe mind about growing with the blockchain, and it was a little bit more in the future, and I was starting today, depending on like my expectations for time to market, I might actually choose EOS. They're both, because it's so promising. It's got so much going on.
Got it. Okay. No, fair point. And I guess point taken, as far as like in the context of today's conversation about 51% attacks and about maturity, Ethereum does seem like the go-to if you're launching a dApp. I guess the different token types, though, and what's being done right now, and then prospects for some kind of growing beyond the support level of support and adoption and maturity that Ethereum has today, and then innovating and iterating into something that is more usable, that like you said, where maybe Solidity doesn't change, but maybe some other aspect of the Ethereum virtual machine does become more performant. Great word, but word of the day, performant.
Yeah, performant. Well, I mean, and don't get me wrong, there's other competing projects out there as well, like Quantum, and there's probably a few others that I just can't think of off the top of my head. But
yeah,
Quantum's really interesting because they're
NXT,
like less
NXT actually, yeah, NXT and gosh, what was crud? I'm gonna look it up. Yeah, other platforms.
Tron and geez, what's the other one? There's even like
Tron is apparently specific to gaming and like esports gaming,
like money like stuff. You have Lisk. I mean,
yeah,
they have a smart contract system, but there's a lot of competing products. It's just EOS has managed to raise so much money and build so much hype. There's really, to be honest, of all of the projects that are on my radar, my personal radar, the only other one that even has remotely as excited in terms of new projects is Polymath right now, and it's because of the whole focus on securities tokens rather than just smart contracts in general. But actually, it's a use case. It's not a blockchain level technology per se, but it's a dApp type level technology that they're building that's really exciting to me. Here's the thing: a lot of people in the crypto space, especially, you have something like crypto purists or sort of just like Wild West purists who just don't accept the fact that there's going to be, or don't want to accept the fact that there's going to be regulation. Securities laws they do need a little bit more work. I think they're maybe a little bit too conservative, but it's not to say that our current, at least in the United States, that our current securities frameworks are terrible, because especially post Jobs Act, when we got Reg CF and Reg A plus and Reg D 506C, there's a lot of really like user-friendly options available for having fully SEC compliant securities, or building, I should say, offering fully compliant securities without completely getting killed. I mean, it's still burdensome. Don't get me wrong. Like, the amount of legal fees and setup is somewhat burdensome. But if you're going to be asking people for like millions of dollars or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, a little bit of sort of like structure is probably a good thing.
Yeah, maybe take them to dinner first. Maybe.
So the SEC, their rules have evolved to where they are for a reason, to protect them, primarily to protect the investors, and so I think they've had a very measured approach to the way they've done the enforcement on ICOs and stuff like that. They've really only have gone after the most egregious violators and fraudsters. They are going to probably over the next couple of years be doing a lot of cleanup, twisting the arms of a lot of ICOs that were non-compliant, that were under their jurisdiction, and that might take the form in various different. It might take shape in various different forms of sort of enforcement actions, that up to and including disgorgement, which means they have to give back all the money. But it's I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think that, for example, well, EOS didn't even fundraise in America, so
they just didn't even bother.
Yeah, well, they put VPNs up and stuff to stop Americans from investing, but that just moves them out of the jurisdiction of the SEC. It does not move them out of the jurisdiction of other securities in other countries, securities regulators in other countries, and they have similar rules in most other countries.
Right. Yeah. Well, those two acronyms that we started the episode with, KYC and AML. There's a form of those two concepts in every major developed nation.
Yeah. And I think they may have, a lot of ICOs might feel comfortable saying, well, we'll just ban Americans, because they don't feel like those other jurisdictions have the clout to actually do an enforcement action, like an extra jurisdictional enforcement action.
Well, they might not be wrong to some extent. I mean, you've heard me talk, we've spoken recently over the phone about Envion, the recent controversy between the CEO and the founding team of Envion. And about how right now it's coming to light that of the $100 million that they raised, that a significant chunk is now missing I mean, I'm not going to go on record as like accusing any one party of like embezzlement or anything. But at the same time, a lot of money's gone.
Yeah.
Upwards of 20 to 30% of the raise is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like, where did it go? Who knows? And what will the repercussions be? I don't know, because part of what they did was in Switzerland, and part of what they did was in Germany, and part of what they did was in another country. And they turned regulatory oversight of their operation into an absolute cluster, probably intentionally. Again, I won't name any one party there, but possibly intentionally, hopefully not in collusion, but possibly intentionally, so that when it came time to like embezzle the golden parachute, nobody could find it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Europe, they do have reasonable, competent regulators, and most of the countries you mentioned are under the EU's jurisdiction. So,
right. I wonder what the process is going to look like to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
Because I think right now they're doing the equivalent of of running to state actors within the United States system. Like there's a progression, right? A progressive use of
through each court
state. Yeah. So ascending court jurisdiction. And I think right now that they're still at the very lowest levels of invoking state assistance in enforcing some of these contracts. And then even they've brought not criminal lawsuits, but just civil lawsuits against each other. Like they're in the slap fight phase, right? of squabbling about this thing. But I do question, like, if they chose some of those states, not only because it was easier to raise the money, but also because it might be easier at this point to deal with the fallout.
Right. Well, shoot, that would imply that they are fraudsters. So ultimately,
and I'm not implying that. For the record, I'm not implying that. But I am wondering if anywhere along the line, perhaps there's an actor who is unseen. Perhaps there's an actor who is on the record and by all appearances has done things by the book, but has been able to effectively just really mask the path of their raise to something else.
That's part of the reason why the SEC in this country why they're so uncomfortable about the way that so many ICOs are conducted, is because the actual participants aren't always disclosed. And that's a big thing, especially a lot of the Jobs Act type exemptions. It's real important that they know that you disclose who the people are that are involved, and not just go on the record publicly, but go on the record with the SEC, like tell them directly who's involved with stuff. It's really, again, the regulatory, it's a maze. It's a regulatory sort of gauntlet that you need to run. It's a gauntlet, but it's not I say gauntlet because there is a known path. Like the actual route is known. All you need to do is know the rules. It's very easy to go through the gauntlet, take all your slaps, and then get to the other side. And you can always say, look, I play by the rules. It's like, it doesn't, I was, again, even this year, earlier on this year, I was talking to people about ICO type stuff, and there were still people that were advocating the full-on Wild West style ICO. As an American-based company trying to raise any money from Americans, I think it's not a great idea. I don't know how EOS went about it though. If they did a traditional token sale, and because there isn't a bright line. Even the SEC, I've seen multiple interviews with SEC people internally. They will not go on the record to say what are the determining factors. They always point to the Howey test as sort of like what is a security and what's not.
Yeah.
But they won't. They say it's based on the facts and circumstances of the specific situation. So there, token sales, you're pretty much in the safe zone if your token is like you could almost think it like an arcade token for just your arcade, and the arcade exists.
Yeah,
that's the important part.
Good call. Yeah, good call.
If it's a token for an arcade that doesn't exist yet, it's probably on the other side of the line of being a security. It's a loan to the company until they can build the arcade. which is loans are of that type are generally considered securities. So, like you can't, like I said, a lot of
standard 15-minute disclaimer for the show. None of this is to be taken as actual financial or corporate law or any other kind of professional advice.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, and neither is Seth. If you take advice from us, you deserve what happens to you.
Yeah, right. Richard Hart and Vloxpo. You deserve to get wrecked.
But having said all that, we're giving you the seeds of what you need to do your own research and have a conversation with your lawyer, because the thing is, they'll weigh in. I have one set of lawyers that the whole crypto token space, they won't even touch it, and my other team is comfortable enough with it. But they still give good, solid, lawyerly advice that keeps us out of trouble.
Well, thank goodness. So the guys that aren't talking about what they don't know and because they're not comfortable enough with it in terms of precedent and in terms of experience, thank goodness that there are people of integrity who are still just saying like I can't go there.
Yeah. So anyway, anyone is like considering doing an ICO? First of all, let me tell you, I've been an advisor on one. It's not exactly an ICO; it's more of an ICO 2.0 type of model, SEC compliant. It's tough to. It takes a lot more marketing than you think, and if you just think it's, going to be as easy as it was last year to go out and just say, I'm raising money for my Uber for cats or Uber for. I was thinking of the most stupid thing I can think of. I can't think of anything stupider than it's Uber for bicycles. It's already been done. Yeah, it's Uber for electric scooters. It's already been done.
It's Uber for Airbnb. Pause for effect.
It's Airbnb for cats, for dogs, for iguanas. It's Airbnb for iguanas. In case you need an iguana for a day, pet iguana. Anyway, there's some pretty lame ideas out there, but
yeah,
it's here's one. I thought of the stupidest idea. It's Uber for dog walkers. Oh, right. Those guys just raised like $60 million,
dude,
or $200 million. They raised some absurd amount of money.
And then the ridiculous thing is that in 2 years' time, they're going to be valuated at like ridiculous sums because people actually spend more money on their dogs than they do on their kids. Anyway.
Yeah. That's probably why they were able to raise so much money, though, is because people do spend more money on their pets than they do on their actual humans in their life. So, where is I going with all this? Oh, yeah. But it's okay to go out and raise hundreds of millions of dollars for Uber for dog walkers because they're doing it the right way. It's not okay if you go and do an ICO and just hang out a shingle and say, it's Uber for dog walkers, and then raise the same amount of money without doing the proper disclosures and jumping through the hoops with the SEC. And
right. So we've taken a sharp left turn into ICOs from the jumping off point of platforms for new token launches. So it sounds like Ethereum, great way to go because they're established and there's precedent basically. You've probably got some mentorship there, strong mentorship from other projects that have launched. And then with EOS, huge opportunity, and it looks really sexy.
And a lot of open source to learn from already too on Ethereum. And with stuff like Loom, you have options for scaling. Loom essentially just launched this thing called Zombie Chain or something like that, which is essentially a proof of concept of a side chain.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, Loom is so that you can make your own side chains. We realized that that's a lot of work. So we made a side chain for you that you can use as your main net while you're just bootstrapping or testing or whatever. And then they just charge you. So it's side chain as a service, but they also give you the software to make your own side chain if you want. So they're pretty cool that way. You got a lot of options with Loom.
Nice.
And they're saying that it's, as performant as EOS, that they've essentially allow you to, that's the idea behind it, is it's like a EOS-like side chain that's that performant that you can use to build your large scale dApps, but they're still rooted. It's like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Rootstock project. That's actually come along. I'm not completely up to speed on Rootstock. Last time I read up about it was several months ago, but it's side chains on Bitcoin, right? So, and it adds smart contracts and stuff as well. So in a way, Loom is sort of like the equivalent on the Ethereum network. It solves the scalability problem, still lets you be rooted in Ethereum's security and main chain, but still have these high performance side chains. So we're getting there, man. The technology is coming along and there's, like I said, for anybody who just thinks there's no projects happening in this space, they're just willfully ignorant. I mean, between all these scaling initiatives, between things like the security tokens coming along this way, the alternative registered exchanges, you might have noticed that Coinbase just announced that they essentially acquired a registered ATS. So they're moving into securities as well. You've got T0 in that space. This is going to be the year of securities tokens and more performant dApps, blockchain dApps that don't choke when, a lot of people want to try to buy a cat.
Wow. We're not naming names, but yeah, no, awesome. No, totally. Absolutely. 2018, absolutely. Year, but there needed to be as an essential component of the growth of blockchain. There had to be the awkward adolescent phase of ICOs and the fraudsters coming in, right? Mm-hmm. Where there's blood, there are sharks. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's blood, there in the water, there's sharks. So now the
SEC's death ray has been directed towards the industry, so the fraudsters will be duly toasted.
Yeah. So hey, some regulation makes sense. Over-regulation, of course, stifles creativity, stifles innovation. So hopefully we can continue along that trend. And again, maybe the closing question is EOS or Ethereum, and to which I think we found an answer that we've got the wrong word there.
Yeah.
EOS and Ethereum.
Yeah. Do your homework, because it's the same kind of thing. The facts and circumstances of the specific project. I mean, because like I'm evaluating both for another project that I'm working on, and Loom is the only thing that saved Ethereum. Let me put it that way. Now that it's got that, then it looks like it might be a viable option for our back end.
Awesome. Well, cool. So, man, hey, if this is your first time tuning into this show, well, guess what? It's ours too. We just barely kicked this thing off. So let us know down in the comments below. Was there a topic, if you watched this entire video, was there a topic that you heard us talk about that you thought like, what Aaron had to say about that was awesome, and I want to hear more from Aaron about that topic? Were there a couple of topics? Let us know in the comments below. Really, we want this to be, moving forward, more of a conversation where we're able to respond to some of the questions that you have. And because as you see, if we really felt like it, we could take this exact same running length and we could probably double or triple it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing to do would be to try to stay more on topic too. Like actually, if we were doing this as more of an actual regular show kind of thing, we would pick a topic and we would just try to keep it on topic and fit the whole thing into like a more reasonable nugget.
Absolutely. So we put it to you. What do you want to hear us talk about from some of the topics that you heard us talking about already? We talked about hardware. We talked about mining software. We talked about proof of work. We talked about proof of stake. We talked about kind of at a, not at a low level, but at a mid level, somewhere between low and high level. Talked about some of the mechanisms of consensus and proof of work and proof of stake. We talked about 51% attacks. We talked about coin launches, ICOs. We talked about the sexiness of crypto versus the utility of blockchain. And then we talked about all kinds of stuff in between, ending that discussion, or ending today's discussion on platforms that can kind of be used for both the sexiness of securities and crypto and the utility of blockchain and technology, and creating, launching new stuff that's kind of both. So you tell us down in the comments below, what was a topic that you really enjoyed hearing us talk about today? And we'll see if we can't hone in that focus a little bit more for the next one. If and when that happens.
We could do more topical things where it's like, today's topic is security tokens. Today's topic is just, let's say, different ICOs, or just mining, some specific component of mining. It's like, or there's another thing too, which is visual effects and animation, which is totally not the topic of this channel. But like, if you're interested in film stuff at all, like I have a huge amount of background in that, so I can talk a lot about that. So.
And we know a couple of guys. We know a couple of guys who can chat about that also. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you listening to us basically just ramble for like an hour and a half about crypto related stuff. Thanks for tuning in this time. Can't wait to talk to you again in the near future. You're really the reason that we decided to record this, because otherwise we'd keep our conversations private. You're not entitled to listen to us talk. Yeah. So tell us what you want to hear.
Cool.
All right, guys. See you next time.
Goodbye.